don't go to Houston too often, but maybe it'll happen. As it turns out, I'm here for a mini reunion with my college roommates, and one of my buddies happens to live in Houston. So I said, when's your meeting? Well, it's the week I'm here. So that's why I'm here. So thank you to Tara, and thank you to Andrea, who I met yesterday at Mercer Gardens. When I was there, we went and visited Mercer Gardens.
The magic word, succulent. And I was like, what? It perked me up.
And here we are. So, and I'm here with my three buddies from college, Doug, Rich, and Steve over there, who are here to hear me and see me up in front of an audience for the first time in their entire life. So I just ask a few things of all of you. One, your cell phone. No card playing, no solitaire. You can take pictures, you can ask questions, and I don't want anyone falling asleep like that dude back there. I still have my phone. Okay. I also heard a rumor through the grapevine that the Houston Club is the best club and the most fun. So are you guys ready to have some fun?
Yes.
Okay, let's get the party started. So tonight I'm going to share with you some information of stuff that I've learned over the years, some of my collection, and some of my pottery too. So let's see if make sure this works. There we go.
Oh.
So tonight we are going to talk about. There's too much to talk about, and I only have till 10 o'clock, Andrew. You said
Yes,
to talk to you
that's
guys. So I'm going to keep it limited to Phockeas, Cacapodiums, some staging information, and some pottery. So here's a few more. I know you guys want to see. If I'm you, I want to see some cool stuff. So here's some of my. These are all in my pots, by the way. So real briefly, who am I? What am I doing here? Why do I do all this stuff? Well, how do I get into plants? Well, like I told my buddies over there, my dad was a gardener for many, many years, and I always helped him out. So I had a love for gardening and for plants. But living in New York, kind of limited to what you can have. So in 1975, I drove cross country and moved to San Diego. And when I got there, it was like, what is going on here? It's warm, it's sunny, and there's plants everywhere. And I started collecting like crazy. But you don't believe me? Well, there I am. The same, right? Yeah. So here I was. This is my first place in San Diego, and I surrounded myself in plants. I couldn't help it. I was just out of control. So that's when the journey started for my plant collection. But the journey didn't really kick in big time until I moved to Los Angeles in 1990. And the first week I was there, I went to a garden center and I was looking at some echeverias. I still love echeverias. Then you would not like an echeveria. And I met this guy who happened to be on the board of the Los Angeles Cactus and Succulent Society, and he's talking my ear off, and I said, okay, I'll go to a meeting. The next week, I find myself walking into a meeting like this, looking around and going, what the heck is this stuff? I've never seen this stuff before. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, that these were succulents. And the very first succulent that caught my eye were gasterias. Does everyone like gasterias?
Yeah.
I love gasterias, and I couldn't believe that it was even a succulent. So this is just one part of my living wall of gasterias. This goes about 30 feet long. And as you know, these grow very slowly if you have gasterias, but I have some giant ones, and those are in pots. You can't see. But anyway, let's move on to what we're really here to talk about. So I went from just gasterias to, I gotta get some stuff here, some caudex. Once I found a caudiciform and I found a plant that had a caudex, that's when everything changed for me. And over the years, I collected everything, just like all of you, cactus, all kinds of succulents, euphorbias, eriocarpus, you know, everything, until I got into, let's focus on what I really get the most joy from. And that's what I tell people. You can collect everything you want. Start thinking about what you really get and garner the most joy when you're from your plants. And to me, it's stuff like this. So let's talk about some Phockeas. Some people call them Phockeas, and that's okay. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's actually Fockea. Now let's talk about some, does anyone know how many species of Fockea there are? 6, 12, 18?
No, there's hundreds, aren't there?
If you said 6, you're right. Okay, so most of these are Phoceas. Does everyone have a Fockea in there?
Yes.
Does everyone know what a Fockea is? No? Okay, well, Phoceas look like something like this. But let's talk about the species. Those are my feet. Those are my feet.
Oh. Look at that.
That's me walking.
Ugh.
There's a few more. I know you guys want to see some good pics. There you go. And just so you know, these are not seedlings, okay? These are 20 to 40 years old, these
Oh, wow.
plants. Right? So let's talk about a few facts. There's only a few here, and I want to bring them up so the next dinner meeting, when you're talking to your friends, you can bring this stuff up. Okay, where are they from? What's the habitat of a Fockea? South Africa. Are they deciduous? Everyone knows what deciduous is. They go dormant. Well, Phoceas go dormant, but they're semi-deciduous, which means they stop growing. The vines will start to die back, but you'll always have a big tuft of green leaves. So it's never completely, you know, like a lot of other, like Pachys, some of them will just lose every leaf. Phoceas retain a good chunk of leaves on the top. So they're semi-deciduous. Dioecious means separate male and female plants, separate flowers. The common name is Hottentot red because they're from South Africa. And years ago, the native Hottentots, you would grind these up. They're edible, but they're not really edible. Their namesake was Charles Fockea. He was a Dutch botanist from the 1800s. And tubercules, you know what tubercules are? Those little bumps that are all over the Phoceas. Every Fockea has some degree of tubercules. And there's reasons for that, and there's different reasons for it. Something, as you raise them up, they develop more tubercules to increase the surface of them to dissipate the heat. Okay, one last fact, this is crazy. The oldest potted plant in the world in existence today is a Fockea crispa, 230 years old.
Wow.
And there it is. That's the one in my garden. No, I'm only kidding. I wish it was. No, it's in Austria. So back in the late 1700s, the Austrian king sent his gardeners down to South Africa to bring some crazy stuff back, and they brought back a crispa. So let's look at a few of the six species. So everyone knows Edulis or Edulis. This is the most common Fockea. You can find them pretty much anywhere. And it has a narrow kind of leaf, flat leaf. The Capensis or crispa, the only difference is the leaf. It has that wavy edge to it. That's the only difference. And there you can see the flower. That's the flower. They're really insignificant flowers. They're very small. The Gustifolia, well, you missed the IA there, but the only difference with the Gustifolia is that the leaf is a little broader. It's still flat. It's just a wider leaf. And the multiflora, I really like the multiflora. These are the fastest growing of them. Their vines just grow like crazy. But also, all the ones I have or I have seen, the skin is just a little bit different. See, it has a little color to it. That's the only one that has that kind of texture of skin to it. And I really like it. These are hard to find. If you happen to ever see a multiflora, just buy it. Okay. And here's one, the Cameroon. Long, thin leaves. Another one, very difficult to find. If you're at a sale or you're at a show or anywhere, if you see a Fockea Cameroon, just buy it. You'll be happy you have it because it's very rare, very rare. And the last one is a sinuata. It's incredibly rare. I've never seen one. I don't have one, and I couldn't even find a picture of one. But there are narrow leaves, they're short branches, and they have the wavy margins too. So I'm not even sure it's real. but that's what I know, and that's what I was told. Okay, so I get this question all the time because I grow these things like crazy. I have hundreds of them. They're vines. So remember, Phockeas, just like many other Caudiciforms, are geophytes, which means they grow underground. The only thing you see above ground is that little top of the caudex, and they vine like crazy. And there's a reason for vining, but do you let them vine, or do you prune them back and keep them looking really nice? Well, the main reason for these things to vine so much in habitat is because when they vine, they end up covering the top of that caudex to protect it from the sun. That's really the main reason. There's really no other reason to do it. Now, the other reason you want to let your Phockeas vine is many believe that if you let them vine, the caudex grows faster. Underground, not above ground. Once you lift this out, take it out from that dirt, and you have it above the dirt, whatever you have above the dirt grows incredibly slow. All the caudex growth is subterranean. So if you let them vine, what's under the ground may grow faster. And then there's some other experts that say, no, if you trim them back and keep them pruned back, the caudex grows faster. So what's the moral to that story? It doesn't really matter. It's whatever you're comfortable with. So what do I do? Because I'm sure you're thinking about that. So what does this guy do up here? I alternate. 1 year, I let them vine out, and they just take over. You can barely even see the caudex on these things. It's crazy. And you can see how these vines just grow. And then the next year, I keep them pruned back so I can really appreciate and look at the magnificence of that caudex. So you let them vine. I mean, it gets crazy. They get completely intertwined, overlapping. You can't separate them. You can't remove a plant if you want to get to it. So it's a lot of green. And then if you keep them pruned back, you get to see the whole caudex. So here I pruned a couple back so you can see the difference. Instead of being covered in green, at least you see a caudex. And here's one more. In my pot, of course, in case you were wondering. And how nicely staged is that, may I ask? I have a question.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. When do you know when to take them out? Like when you have the perfect caudex? Like when do you lift them out of the dirt? Like how do you know?
Well, that's the question of the century, okay? You don't really know. How I know is when you have it buried in your pot, if you're talking about when it's in a plastic pot before you take it out, you want to feel the weight of it. You want to feel, I wait till the underground caudex actually is against the inside of the pot, so it's firm. Then you know you have a good caudex. But you know what? It doesn't matter. Just take it out of the pot, take a look at it. If it looks pretty good and you like it, raise it up. If it's still looking small, put it back in and cover it up. It doesn't hurt the plant. Just do it very carefully. You don't want to tear all the roots. But it doesn't really matter. Mine that I have staged like this, about every 3 years, I lift them out, clean out the dirt. Oh, that's the president of the CSSA calling me. Wish he'd leave me alone. So about every 3 years, because if you leave them in too long, the soil gets too compressed. And when you water, you don't not really watering very much. So about every 2 to 3 years, take them out. And if you feel it looks good under there, lift it up a little bit more. If not, just leave it alone. That's perfect. I'm perfectly happy with the way that looks right now. Okay, so here's what they look like in the summertime. Look, if you guys went ooh and ah and clap once in a while, that's okay. It's all right. I'm okay with that. Okay. So thank you, whoever that was. Right. So here, this is an array of some of my favorite plants. So what I've learned over years is, in my backyard, I only keep the plants that I just love to look at, not just to have more, okay, or to have increase my collection. I want the ones I really love. So here's some of them, and you can see it how it's just a mass of green. You can see some caudex, some global Caudiciforms. And here's in the winter time. See how everything's cut, everything's trimmed back? See how I have these Phockeas trimmed back? And you can see the caudex. Does that make sense? Now, if you want, in the summer, you can keep them like this if you want. It's perfectly okay. Trust me, there was a collector down in San Diego who was a master, and he said, no, never let them grow, the vines, just keep them cut back. So, to me, it's whatever you want to do, whatever you like. So that's a winter picture. Okay, come on, guys, I want to hear at least some ooh or ah on this.
Yeah.
I mean, look at these. So you got an adenium, a swazicum, you have a rapioacme. Look at the size of this Fockea and that Fockea. I mean, so these are some of my favorite. They're all my favorite, you know. But I mean, those are just magnificent. I look at these every day, guys. I'm out in awe every day looking at this stuff. So, and of course, they're my pots too. I don't like to say that, do I? Okay, so let's look at some Caudex varieties, some different stuff. Okay, so Caudex the one thing, people say, why do you like Caudiciforms so much? And the reason is because they're each so unique. There are no two Caudex or codices that are the same. And I have hundreds of them. There are some that are similar, but they're all different. Some could be very singular, they could be doubles, they can be intertwined. So that's a Pachapodium succulatum, that's a Ficus pomeroy. Every one is different. Doesn't matter what species you have or what a genus you have, they're all different. And that's what I enjoy looking at. So that's just a couple different varieties. Not a bad Fockea there at the end.
Look at the pot.
Yeah. Look at that, that's a Rapioacme flanagani. Another ficus. I love the ficus, by the way, pomeroy, and so there you go. So here's some more. Okay, I mean, this is about close to 40 years old. It's actually about this big. Okay, so and just in case you're wondering, you're not going to find any of these plants like this at any sale you go to. Okay, people just don't sell these at sales and shows. This doesn't happen. And that's another one. So you can see how different, they're totally different. They're crazy, and the crazier they are, the more I love them. Look at those tubercules. Look at that. Is that insanity? That's insanity. And you notice that has a different color, the one on the right?
Yeah.
I got that from a good friend of mine down in San Diego who kept that in direct sun for years.
Wow.
So it ended up, that's the only reason I can think of why it's that color. Otherwise, it would be like the one on the left. And I have a couple more like that. And I think they're really cool. I think that makes it very different. Here's a double. Now here's the other thing I gotta tell you guys. Every one of my specimens that I have, and you can see I have quite a few, I know when I acquired it, who I acquired it from, what I paid for it, and so many of mine actually have meaning. I know who I bought them from, and some of these are 2 and 3 owners deep.
Oh.
So some of these, so I'm not the original owner on most of these. I've acquired these from other collectors. So the one on the left is actually 2 plants. I got that from the curator of the Huntington Garden, from his garden. After he passed away, I used to help him out, but he had these 2 Fockeas in these 2 4-inch pots that were just busting out next to each other for probably 10 or 15 years. So he goes, yeah, so I took those, and when I took them out of the pots, I said, they've been together forever. I'm gonna leave them together, which is against my principles because usually it's 1 plant, 1 pot. But I had to make an exception this time, and there it is. It's pretty cool, isn't that pretty? See, so they have meaning. So when I look at that, I think of Gary. And here's a few more. Does anyone know what the one on the right is? That's a Pentapentia. And of course the Fockea. And I think I got a couple. Now, is that a crazy? You know what this big one is?
No.
That's a
Ficus?
ficus. It's a ficus.
Is that
What's the
petrified wood or a rock?
That's petrified wood. It's a rock. So does anyone know what the common name of ficus is?
The strangler?
Rock fig. It's a rock fig. So they grow over rocks. If you see them in Mexico in habitat, they're amazing. So I created that. I bought that when it was much smaller. I took it out of the pot and I saw it had all those roots. I put that stone in there and then I put it back in the pot for about maybe 8 years, 9 years.
With the stone under the
With
dirt?
the stone in it. When I took it out, you can't remove that stone. It's just locked in there. But it's a rock fixer. How cool is that, right? You see these big guys back here? You know what those are? Yes, they are. And those are almost 70 years old, those guys. It's a whole nother story for those, but I don't have time. We gotta move on here. Okay, Pachapodium. Pachapodium, they really move me. Look at the color of that bark on that skin on the Pachapodium. You can't get those on any other plant. Well, there's one other we'll get to in a minute, but look at that. So how many are there? Anyone know? 20, 60, 26. Am I gonna talk about all these? No way, I'd be here all night, forget about it. But I am gonna talk about a few that I like, and that I think you'll like too. Because I've learned over the years, there's some collectors who want to get every species so they can say they have the whole, who cares? You know, does it really matter? Get what you like. Habitat, Madagascar, also South Africa, Pachys, thick, Pottery foot. And the spines are in pairs and does everyone have Pachapodiums at home?
Yeah.
If you do, when you go home, take a look at it. You'll see that the spines actually spiral around each branch. That's absolutely one of its characteristics. And look at the color of that. That's about at least 35 years old, maybe 40. Saunderside. Who had that little Saunderside seedling earlier?
Right there.
Back table. yeah.
Okay, so hold
Those
on
are from
a
Carla's
second, guys.
seeds.
Okay, seedling.
Yeah, but hers is pink, so this is a pink one.
Okay.
So let's see
Anyway,
if we get it.
this just shows you what happens after about, 25 years or so. So and what's nice about the Saunderside, which makes it different, look at the color of the Saunderside, that green. That's one of the few that have that color. And that's the flower of the Saunderside. They're usually kind of a white or whitish. Bispinosum, okay, this is the top of my list, the Bispinosum. Look at that codex. And the flower is different. It's more of a bell-like. Does everybody have a Bispinosum?
No.
But I will.
Well, if you have a choice of all of these, most Pachapodiums are deciduous. They lose all their leaves, but not the Bispinosum. The Bispinosum is always green. It will lose a few leaves. It'll stop growing, but it always has leaves. It doesn't flower all the time, but it always has leaves. Succulentum. Look at that succulentum. So the succulentum, that's the flower of succulentum. So the only way you can tell a difference between a lot of the species of Pachapodiums is only one way, the flower. So can you tell the difference between a succulentum and the Bispinosum? No way, unless you see a flower. They're just the same plant, but the flower is different. And that will lose every leaf on it in the winter. And the Lameri. This is my front yard. So you can see it's in a pot. That's one of its pups. And we're gonna keep going up a little bit here. And we're gonna keep going.
Oh my.
Hold on, we're almost to the top. Hang on. And there she is, okay? Is that cool or what? I love the flowers. It's almost like a plumeria, the flower, isn't it? So I got this species at Home Depot, okay? At Home Depot about 20 years ago. Sometimes, I get a few, but this is one of the few. When it was about this big, and it had these little tiny pups. Well, I've had that all these years and it never flowered until 2 years ago. All of a sudden, big, thick flower stalk. I'm like, wow, look at that. And after the flower stalk, which happens on most of the Lameris or Aguirres, is it trifurcates. So now I have 3 stalks instead of the 1. And now that's blooming. And that one, I notice now, when it finishes, that's also gonna bifurcate now. So, okay. That's all I'm talking about at Fockea and Pachys. I wanna talk about staging, because this, to me, this is really important. I've been staging for years, and I've learned some from master stagers. The way I look at staging is a few different ways. One, what is staging? So staging is a way to present your specimen in the best light, not just to put it in a pot and say, oh, it looks nice. I talk about staging as if I'm going to show. All of my plants, as you saw, already I can pick anyone up and bring it to a show. That's how I think about staging. But they're individual. You can stage your plant any way you want. Some people put little figures in there and little pieces of whatever you want to do. But staging is making your plant look the best it possibly can. So what's the first principle of staging? Orientation. Now, that's not always true with cactus, because cactus are singular, you know, it's just one, you can't turn it sideways, it's just there. But for Caudiciforms, it's different. So you can see how this one is horizontal. So when you look at your specimen, you kind of get an idea. But when you take it out of that original pot, you want to look at it. Can I do something different with it? It's perfectly okay just to leave it vertical. They always look good. But I like to change it up a little bit, get some character out of that specimen. So if you can change the orientation and make it look different like that, you can see it's horizontal, but the leaves and the vines are still growing upright. So that's orientation. Proportion. This is absolutely critical. You want to make sure your specimen is in the right size pot. You don't want to put a big specimen in a pot and squeeze it into this pot. It just doesn't make sense, but people do. And on the other side, you don't want to take that little Areocarpus that's this big and put it in a pot this big and then surround it in rocks and think it looks cool. Because why? Then you look at the pot and the rocks, oh, and there's the plant. Okay, it doesn't make sense. I mean, if that's what you like to do, then that's fine. But proportion, you always want to have the pot a little bit larger, of course, at least an inch, maybe 2 inches wider than. See, Tara, nice job. Or if you want, depending on the specimen, maybe you want to put a rock or two around it to make it look more, maybe a more natural habitat. Then you need a pot to accommodate that. There you go, there I am, I just got one staged. Topping, okay, topping. You never want to see dirt, okay? If you see dirt on one of your staged specimens, not good. Don't bring it to get judged. I mean, you can, but you always want to have topping on there, whatever that is. I have topping, I have one more bag. This is my favorite topping. It's actually like a crushed lava rock, and it's great. I don't like when you put sand on, because some people like sand, but then it just washes off, or it solidifies and it cracks, and I think it looks horrible. And you don't want to use white. A long time ago, a collector was saying, you never use white. It bleaches out your plant and doesn't look natural. So, but topping is important. So select whatever topping you want, small, larger, it's okay, but you have to cover the dirt. And the last one is the landscape. Do you want to put rocks around it? Do you want to stage it with rocks? Or not? You don't have to. A lot of people think they have to put this little specimen in this big pot and put some cool rocks in, if that's what you like, but it doesn't make sense. So those are the staging principles. And here's some I wanted to show you, some actual staged plants and what they look like. And the other thing about rocks, okay, you know, rocks are in the eyes of the beholder, but it's easy to find rocks anywhere and just, you know, pieces of granite or whatever, and just throw them in your thing. But I always say, if you're going to use a rock, use something cool. Use something like, well, I mean, look at the rocks. So I only use, most of the rocks I have acquired are from Arizona or New Mexico. You know, some friends, they drive up their Jeeps up into the mountains and they pick up these crazy rocks. And to me, that really enhances that specimen instead of just, you know, any old run-of-the-mill, you know. So we talked about orientation. Why not? It's resting on the rock. That could be natural and habitat too. So to me, I look at that. I think that looks pretty cool. I like it. It's different, okay? It's different. So when I take my specimen out of a pot, I'm always thinking, how can I do this differently? And look at the rock that I'm using, right? And there's the one that I have around the rock, or petrified wood in my case. And now here's some with no rocks. I put that Raphioacme in that pot and I said, you know what? I just love the way that looks. I don't want to have anything else to look at. I just want to look at that. I just want to look at that Raphio. Now those are two different Raphioacmes in two different pots. Don't need rocks. Could I put rocks in there? Sure, absolutely. There's plenty of room in there. But I just love the way they look without rocks. Maybe down the road, I always move things around. I'll move rocks around too in mine. Sometimes I'll take them out. Sometimes I'll put them back. So again, it's just to have fun. But it's what catches your eye. To me, that works for me. And there's some more. You can see some have rocks. See that Adenium glauca in the back? You guys see that, that green? That's what I like. If you can find an Adenium glauca that has that green. Sometimes they have the white on the side. Yeah, that's pretty old, that Adenia. I've had that a long time. Unfortunately, I had one that was twice that size that I had for about 15 years. I lost it last year. So, even the best of us, we lose specimens. It just happens. So another Raphioacme on the right with no rocks, one on the left with some rock. It's resting on that rock. So again, it's just variability. It's just what you like at the moment. So you see, I try to make them look natural in my pots, not some crazy pot, just something very organic looking. So I did these videos so you kind of feel like you were there looking at some of my specimens. Look at that Raphioacme. Oh my God. That's about this big. That's about that big.
Hey, Robert,
Yes.
how often and how much do you water?
Oh.
Can we talk about watering?
Hang on to that
Okay.
question. Yep, yeah. I don't want to stay here too late, so I want to answer that for you, because that's a great question. I knew somebody was going to ask me that. I'm surprised one of you guys over there didn't ask me, but that's okay.
I want to know if you're missing them.
Yeah, I do. That's a great question. Now, my wife, when we go away on vacation, after about 3 or 4 days,
Yep.
I'm thinking about these guys, and I can't wait to get home, you know. Okay, pottery. Okay, you guys, I want to show you some of my pottery. You can see some of my pottery over here. So, I trained with Erica Van Acker. You guys probably know Erica. She was really mostly Southern California. She unfortunately passed away a few years ago. And she made pots just like this. Organic, beautiful pots. And when I got into collecting, I'd bring my specimens home, and then what do I put them in? What do? We go looking for pots, right? And that's what I did, until I finally went to a show, and I saw Erica's pots. And I'm like, oh my God, these are the pots. I want these pots. So I would go to every show, some of them just to buy her pots. And I'd buy as many as I could afford. I would buy a lot. But I never met her. And then about 2 years later, I went to a show in LA, and there was this little lady standing over there, and I said, Erica? She said, yeah. Well, that was the beginning of a wonderful relationship. Turns out she lived about 10 minutes from me.
Awesome.
And I said to Erica, would you mind if I come by your house and get some pots from you instead of waiting for the show? She goes, sure, of course, Robert. I was over there, I would call her when she opened the kiln, and I was over there probably once a month for about 3 or 4 months. And I was already taking a class. I live in Burbank. They have a really good pottery studio there. And I was working on the wheel, and I was so bored with the wheel, you know. I mean, I enjoyed it, but I was bored with it. And I said, Erica, I want to take a hand building class. And I said, which one would you recommend? I had a brochure. And she looked at me and said, why do you want to take one of these classes? I said, I want to learn. And she goes, why don't you just come here? I'll teach you. Now, she'd been making pots for like 40 years, and she never had an apprentice. She refused to take. Everybody wanted to learn her techniques, but I was there. I got to be friends with her, and she said, I'll teach you. I spent a year with her, going once a week, and sometimes twice a week, learning from the very beginning on her techniques, which are very unusual and very different. And it took a year before she says, okay, you're on your own now. That's how long. She was this little German lady with a heavy accent, so funny. I went over, we just had a blast. Unfortunately, she got older and she moved to Florida with her daughter, and she passed away. I talked to her every week. Anyway, Erica's philosophy, okay, that's how I got started into making my own pots. Erica's philosophy was very simple. You want the plant to be the star. I'm not making a pot to be the star. If you buy a pot that overpowers your plant, you've made a mistake. We're in plants, we want to get the Caudiciforms, we want to get the cactus, and you want to put it in a really nice pot. But she said it has to be natural, it has to be organic. No spikes, none of this stuff. She would get so angry when she would see these other pots. Okay? But I'm not saying you should, that's just your personal taste, but organic. Keep it organic, keep it simple. So that was her philosophy. There she is, that's Erica. Sorry about that. So that's little Erica and I. That was taken about 6 years ago. She was a great friend. I still miss her as of today. Every pot time I make a pot, I think of her because I have her picture right in front of me. There's one of her pots. And there's another one of her pots. So you see, aren't they beautiful? So if you ever come across at any show, sometimes people will let their pot, an Erica pot, you can turn it over and look. Hers are very distinctive with her feet and everything. Just buy them. I collect her pots. I'm always looking to pick up another. I have about at least 50 or 60 of her pots. I have most of them in my studio. I don't even have anything in them. I just like to look at them. And they're inspiration to me. I look at that and say, I'm going to make one similar to that. I never make one exactly, which I can. When she passed away a few years ago, in her memory, I made 10 pots, 10 replicas of hers, and I sold them. So that's Erica, and that's her philosophy, and that's why I make pots. And here I am, and that's my studio, with the pot and with my plants, of course. In my studio, you see, I always have pots. I'm always making pots. So a special shout out to my daughter Janelle, if you're watching. So she came in a few years ago and said, Dad, why do you have all these pots sitting in here? Everyone loves your pots, I said, well, I need them. She goes, no, let's sell some pots. So I said, okay, how about if I make them, you sell them, okay? So I didn't know anything about Instagram, what's that, Facebook, yeah. So she started the Instagram page, Etsy shop, and if anyone buys a pot from me, usually communicating with Janelle. And I think my wife Carolyn is listening or watching. Thank you for being part of this journey too. So there I am. I'm always out there. I only make, just so you guys are, in case you're wondering, I only make one pot a day. If I'm gonna have a sale, maybe I'll make 2. But every pot I make it as if I'm keeping it myself. And every one of my pots are unique. No 2 are ever gonna be the same. So if you buy a Roberts pot, you're the only one in the world that has that particular pot. And 3 years ago, I had a sale. I was part of a bunch of people, and I had a sale. So that's the only time I was like making 2-3 pots a day for like 2 months. I actually had 160 pots that I made, and you can see them all. Look at that. That's just insanity.
It's amazing.
And I actually get a kick out of looking at that because it's just so crazy that I made so many. And we sold every one of them too. Every one of them we sold. Okay, let's talk about some shapes. Because this goes back to staging and what do you put your plant in. So let's talk about some shapes. So again, here's my pots. You can see every pot I make is different. So none of my pots are ever perfectly round. Nothing in nature is perfect. So I never make them perfect. There's always some little character to it, or you can have it oval. I love oval, not for this particular, but if you have maybe a mammillaria cluster that's long, don't put it in a round pot, put it in an oval pot. That will enhance its look. So you want to get an oval pot. And here's some, nothing wrong with glaze. I love glaze, and you know what? I'm okay. I have so many people that want color on their pots. Depends on your specimen. And whatever you put in there, I know is gonna look good. So it just depends. Again, you can see, no two look the same. So that's my daughter holding all of those. So I love doing glazes. To me, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot more work to do glaze than to keep it all stained and natural, which I love too. So I have half of my customers like them all natural, the other half want them with glaze. So my glazes, again, I can't reproduce that. A lot of people will write down what glaze they use for each pot. I don't care, because I don't want to have another one that looks just like that. And most of my pots you see here have multiple layers of glaze, which is why it has those distinct and different colors, which I really like. Okay, so, is this true or what? I tried to get it with my picture in there, but I didn't have time, okay? Does that make sense, right? Do we all have the bug here? Okay, well, are we all addicted to this stuff? How can you not be, right? Does that make sense?
Fortunately.
Okay, and there's so as much as I love my pots and my plants, the most love, of course, is my family. That's Janelle, that's her baby, Sadie, and that's me with Braden, who's almost 5, Sadie's 18 months. I spend as much time as I can with them. And here we are every Father's Day. Janelle comes over and we make a pot together for Father's Day. Isn't this heartwarming? Isn't this nice?
Awesome, yeah.
And that's, over there, that's Braden making his first pot this year on Father's Day. He made a pot with his name on it, so he was learning how to, and he did really, really good. So you can see we put Father's Day and the date on the bottom of every pot. So these are very special. Obviously, we don't sell these. These are for us. And I think I have a T-shirt. I have a couple T-shirts for sale if anyone is interested. That's my daughter's idea. So that's the Raphael Acme that we used for that picture. Didn't that come out amazing on that T-shirt?
Yeah.
Is that funny?
That's funny.
You gotta have fun doing this stuff, you know? Okay, are you guys ready? What is this? What?
Wow.
Yes? Right. Isn't that beautiful? This particular, look at that pot it's in. That's one of my favorite pots. It's just so cool. That plant is so old. That's already had 2 owners. I know the original owner. I don't like to drop names, but that's a very old specimen. And look at the color. Okay, let's see what else we've got here. Have you ever seen do you guys know what a mesticlemma is? No? Tuberosum? Or arborescens or arbiflora? Okay, so these are so unique, mesticlemmas. You see the color? That's the only specimen I know that has that burgundy color to it. So these are actually mesticlemma arborescens. And let me tell you, I don't know if you can appreciate, those are about 40 inches tall, just the caudex itself. Those pots are about 18 inches wide. So and of course I had to make the pots to fit these. These are about 30-something years old. These were buried underground by this old-time collector for many, many years, and it was just a few years ago that they dug all these up. And I have 9 of these. Wow. So when I saw these, I was like, bring them on, I want these. Because I've been collecting for a long time, and I know it's hard to even find mesticlemma tuberosums that are nice. These are outrageous. Any take? Raphaelacne Flanagani. I love the Caudex. And these vine like crazy. Oh my God, these are insane the way they vine. I keep these trimmed, kind of. I'll trim these back so that they're this long. A week later, they branch out and they're 2 feet long. Now you guys know.
Fockea.
Fockea, right. Had to throw one easy one in there for you. Look at that. Look at that Mesticlemma. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys. That's not my pot. That's an Erica pot. That's one of the biggest pots she ever made. She had that in her private collection, and she gave it to me. That pot is enormous. So there's a tuberosum and the arborescens, and I think I have one more. The only difference between the two is the Mesticlemma tuberosum, the bark is usually a orange red. The arborescens is that deep, rich burgundy. You guys know what this is. Come on, Crispa. Look at the leaves, right? The wavy leaves. That's a Crispa. Now, the pot. Does anyone like that pot? And let's see what else we have here. Janelle, thank you. Janelle put this presentation together for me. She knew what I wanted, and she did all this. Okay, here's you guys should know what this is. Bispinosa. So this is a different Bispinosa. Pachypodiums come in two varieties. Upright, which are most of them, and if you're lucky enough to get a cascading Pachypodium, grab it. Because they're much harder to find. You can see how long they are. So they get vertical, but they quickly wrap around and cascade. And I love those. I love those. And when they flower, they're covered in flowers, not just all on top.
What color is the flower?
The flowers are the Bispinosa. It's kind of a pinkish red. Thank you, Houston. For you guys, a special offer. You're gonna have any of my pots, you get 20% off. Okay, all you gotta do is put in Houston CSS in our Etsy shop. We're at Robert's Pots. So if you go to our Etsy, Janelle's always putting in new pots. If you're on Instagram, follow us, Roberts_pot. Janelle's always posting pots for sale on Instagram. Check them out. If you find one you like, on our Etsy shop, put in the code, you're gonna get 20% off. If you find one on Instagram, message us and let us know you're from the Houston Club, and we give you a good deal. Okay?
Very nice, thank you.
Thank
So,
you.
glad
Oh,
to be
you
here.
said you were talking about water.
Oh, water, okay, oh yeah, that's right. Thank you, Andrew. Yeah. That is the question of the century. So, how often do you water, Robert? Well, does everybody have a moisture meter?
One.
Okay. If you don't have a moisture meter and you have a collection of succulents, you have to go get one. Because you can't always tell if a plant is watered at the bottom by putting your finger in or even feeling it sometimes. Sometimes the top 2-3 inches, it's completely dry. But that bottom where the root, those fine, small roots are growing, could be sitting in or moist. Oh, but the top's dry, and then you water. And you wonder why your leaves are turning yellow, okay? So, theoretically, you water about once a week. But it varies about your climate. I think you guys have some heat here every now and then, right? So are they getting sun all day and they're in a pot? Well, that pot's gonna get hot too, and that's gonna dry out your soil. Put your moisture meter in. If it's dry, sometimes you might have to water every 3 days. Every 2 or 3 days because it dries out. If it's not dry, don't water. Always side on being dry is always better. These, if you have Caudiciforms, even some cactus, they can go a month, 2 months without a drop of water, and they're perfectly happy. And I know I have a lot of friends or collectors who grow these hard, which means they won't water a caudiciform for 2 or 3 weeks, where it starts to not look good, then they'll hit it. But to me, that's very risky. You got to know what you're doing. So water as the plant needs it. There's no general rule on how often you should water your plants, because it depends on your climate, it depends on the time of year. Once they go dormant, you need to water about once a month, but just a little bit, because you don't want the roots to completely desiccate. You want to make sure they still have some roots. So put a little water in there, but don't drench them. And one more thing about watering, okay? This is probably the most important thing I can tell you. Don't just give it a little water. You need to drench these suckers, okay? Because if you just give it a little water, one, it might not even make it down to the base of the roots. And two, unless you have a soft water system that you're watering your plants with, which most don't have, it's hard water. When you water your plants with hard water, over time there's minerals, there's calcium in there. And what happens? They build up on the roots. So you need to flush them. If you don't water, and that water should go through pretty quick, you should count to 3. The water's coming out, draining from the drainage holes, you gotta flush them out. If you don't do that and just water them from the top a little bit, what happens is that calcium, those deposits will build up around those roots and strangle them. And then you wonder why your plant's not doing good. And you pull it out of there, and the roots are just desiccated because they're not getting any more water. So when you water, flush. Don't just sprinkle them a little bit. That doesn't help them at all. Okay, any other questions?
You never have to worry about frost either, do you?
What's that?
No frost where you're at?
No, I get no frost. It gets down to about, sometimes in the low 30s. And if it does, some of my prize ones, I'll put some frost cloth over to protect them. I'll put them on during the day when they have some sun, so they'll retain a little heat. But no, we don't. You guys get frost?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
We get into the teens.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, guys.
I know.
We are
Really? Oh, that's tough. Well, unless you have some place to keep them, you know, or a greenhouse.
How about your media? Like, what's your soil like?
Soil, I use cactus and succulent mix. There's a bunch of different ones. It really doesn't matter. I try to get one with the least amount of organic material. JB Hunt, have you heard? Or EB Hunt. Get EB Hunt out here. Kellogg. Okay, just get any cactus and succulent mix, but that's not good enough. There's not enough perlite or pumice in there. So I mix about 60% pumice. Can you guys get pumice out here? You know, okay. You have to have pumice. You must add pumice to your soil. So I take my potting soil, I put in, not potting soil, my cactus and succulent soil, I put in pumice, mix it up. You want, you know, the pumice, or you can use almost anything that, you know, that's.
Expanded shale?
Yeah, you can, anything that's not gonna absorb anything, because you want to improve, the better they drain, the happier they are. So it's at least 60, so I know some that use 80% pumice and 20% cactus and succulent mix. So you have to add, and never, ever use potting soil. Never go and get, you know, any kind of potting soil, because that has too much organic material, and what happens, it holds the moisture. You know, for regular plants, they need it, but for succulents and cactus, they do not. They want it fast drying, so add pumice, perlite. I don't like perlite that much because it starts to disintegrate after a while, and it's messy. You can use it, but you gotta put a lot of it in because you're gonna lose a lot. So get pumice, okay? Any other questions I can answer?
What's the average relative humidity where you are?
You know, 50%, 40, 50, maybe 60.
80.
Or
90?
80 to 90, yeah.
90%.
Well, that's why you need a moisture meter too, because if it's really humid, they might not be drying out as fast, and then you have a problem with moisture and heat. So that's why the stuff you see. I was over at Mercer yesterday, and I was with Jacob, and he doesn't have any of these plants, because these would be tough. Although you could grow these in a greenhouse, you can't grow these outside here, I don't think, unless you have a nursery. I mean, unless you have a greenhouse, or you can grow them outside, but you'd have to protect them in the winter.
That's what we do.
So if that's what you do, then
Yeah.
then you can grow any. You can grow any caudiciform.
A couple nights every year, you kind of bring everything inside.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
and
how it works.
even your cactus too. I mean, some of them are right. Yeah. So I love cactus, I love all succulents, but you can see how I've specialized more. In my front yard, I have everything, you know, I have tons of euphorbias, you know, and all kinds of cactus and other succulents, but in my back, my primary collection is all caudiciforms. So it's a different plant. Some people are very afraid to buy caudiciform because how do you take care of it? It looks so different, so I'm glad I can share some information with all of you. Hope I didn't take too much of your time, which I think I did. But I have a few pots for sale. I have 3 left. I want them, they're priced to sell. This is a one-time deal on these pots. I have some topping, I have my cards, I have some stickers if you want. You can take those. And if anybody wants a shirt, I have some shirts.
Very cute.
And you can order these on my Etsy shop too. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. Amazing. We were kind of quiet because we're all kind of speechless. So we're gonna take a 10-minute break.
Okay.
So you guys can chat, take some free plants, and we're